Nathan, and Nathan and I are going to be talking about deep fakes. What are they? What you should know about them? The future of them? What it all means? So let's dig in and have the conversation. So Nathan, where can people find you?
So I'm pretty easy to find. So I'm on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. It's just Nathan Hamiel. I'm on, Mastodon on InfoSec Exchange as N Hamiel. But one of the best ways you could find me is I have a blog called perilous.tech. So so that's a pretty good place to find me, as well as my writings around things like this topic. So usually technology related to kind of social issues. So my day job is I am a senior director of research for Kudelski Security. So we're a global security provider. So I spend a lot of time digging into uh, emerging technologies. So things like AI and quantum security and all of that. So that's what me and my team do there. So all of it's kind of related, but yeah, that's where people can find me.
Excellent, thank you. And I found you on LinkedIn, didn't I?
Yep. Yep. I'm
Yeah.
on, oh yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I guess that should have been first and foremost since we're kind of streaming to LinkedIn at the moment. So yep.
So, what is a deep fake? Tell us what it is.
Sure. So there's probably like a formal definition of deep fakes, but kind of how I think about them is deep fakes are a type of synthetic media that is generated with the purpose of misleading, misinforming, or harassing people. So you can kind of bucket that into to that bucket. So the technology that powers deepfakes is the same kind of technology that people are using to have fun and generate pictures of cats or whatever people generate images of. So it kind of demonstrates this use of a dual use technology. So things that can kind of be used for fun or that people use to generate stock photos for their blog posts can also be used for more nefarious purposes. So it's also probably important to kind of differentiate, misinformation in this context versus standard forms of misinformation. So for the most part, when we talk about deepfakes, we are talking about video, images, and audio.
And as you say, it's people are generating it for a reason.
Correct. So that is the outcome that people are generating it for. So I referred to this as narrative evidence. So an image on its own, is just an image on its own. But what people are using deepfakes for is they're trying to support a particular narrative. So, for example, if wanted to generate an image of the U.S. president, waving a so say the U.S. president was planning a trip
Yep.
to China, and maybe opponents of the president wanted to generate an image of solidarity with China, so they generate an image of the president waving a Chinese flag. So that didn't happen, but the narrative that people are trying to create is different than the reality of the situation, and that's kind of where deep fakes come into play. So they're trying to prove that that a particular incident may have happened that supports a larger
And there's
narrative.
a psychological condition that we all have, which is covered in the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which is generally we jump to a conclusion, we look at it and go, "Oh my God, the president is supporting China," and then we don't actually sit down and go, "Actually, that can't be right. That's got to be a fake."
Cor- Correct, and we're actually in a very bad spot for things like this, because what we really have is kind of a perfect storm of things, right? So we have highly capable technology, right? We have entrenched ideologies, and all of this is happening in an environment with ever decreasing confidence in institutions and experts. So a lot of times the deep fake itself, when let's just call it any kind of misinformation or a photoshopped image or anything, when you point it out to people in a highly entrenched ideology and you say, hey, look, that was fake, they may say, I don't care whether it's fake or not. It supports, the intent of my ideology and my
Okay, yeah.
beliefs. So So we always kind of apply, regardless of how smart anyone is, we always kind of apply our biases
Yes.
first, and that was kind of in Thinking Fast and
Yeah.
Slow as well. So we're kind of creating a mental model of the world. We're seeing how things fit into it, and then having a gut response. I mean, most people don't read the articles they share. They look at the headline, share it because of the headline, regardless of the content.
Yeah, I had it this week where I was interviewed on a podcast, and I made a number of comments. But the person put the podcast out with this is a question, and people just answered the question. They didn't actually listen to my answer on the podcast. Classic.
Ah, yeah. I mean, so that kind of does get into the snippets and quotes thing, because a quote by its very nature is out of context. So, yeah, we that's the fast world that we live in.
And it can be that people are sending or creating deep fakes because they want to elicit money from you. So similar to you getting email from people saying, I've got some money that I need to get out of customs, and if you send me $20,000, it will get the money out or something like that. Uh,
Yeah, so that's it. So on that front, so there are really three major categories that this falls into. So the kind of the supportive narrative evidence that I mentioned, there's the harassment aspect, and then there's also the one where you're kind of violating security controls, and that can be used even for scamming people. So there's techniques where you only need 3 seconds of someone's voice in order to
I heard
clone it.
about that.
So
Yes.
you Yeah, so in that case, you could bypass certain voice print authentications at financial institutions. You could use a family member's voice to call a family member and say, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me some money." There's also been instances of people using deepfake technology to try to bypass KYC systems, which is the Know Your Customer systems, where you sign up for a financial institution, you have to hold up your government issued photo ID and all those
So
things. So
so I
definitely.
heard that there was people basically they were phoning you and they were asking a question where the answer was yes. And when yes, they put the phone down because all they needed you to do was say yes, and then they could actually clone you.
Yeah, it reminds me of the movie, Sneakers, where the guy had to get every every hacker on the planet's gonna hate me right now because I don't remember the exact quote, but it was like, "My name is whatever, my voice is my passport, identify me," and, the lady was trying to record him saying the word passport, but it's really hard to sneak that into a casual conversation to get somebody to say passport. So yeah, I imagine I'll get hate mail over not remembering the exact
And
quote from
and
that
and we've
movie.
also heard of situations where CEOs have been impersonated, and it says, send money. You need to send money to this particular supplier, and it's been and that transaction has been transacted.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That goes back to the voice cloning technology. I mean, some of these things are advancements on like current attacks. So we've always kind of had like phishing attacks and attempts, from that perspective. It's just trying to supercharge those or use different avenues in order to exploit those types of
I've just had
attacks.
a friend, a contact on LinkedIn, who just had their LinkedIn profile hacked, not because someone said click on this link, but they actually said they've been sending out scan on this QR code.
Okay, yeah. So we really have. So we went through it's still Security Awareness Month, I guess. So we went through years of telling people not to
Hmm.
click on links that they don't know, don't understand, and then Twitter came along, and URL shorteners were everywhere, and everybody was clicking on links that they didn't know where it really took them. So we kind of go through boom and bust cycles with technology like that.
So what can people do about it?
Yeah, so I guess this is where it gets a little scary, is that for some of these things, there's absolutely nothing you can do. So if somebody's going to take your image, your likeness, your voice, and put it in a situation, there's really not much you can do about that. Technologically speaking, that's technology is already here. I think for things like scams, especially like with family members at your organization, for example, you could set up a shared, passphrase or password to say, "Hey, is it really you? Please." tell me what our shared password is. It's the effectiveness of that isn't foolproof, but it may be enough to thwart the attack because that's something the attacker wouldn't know when they were when they were having that conversation, or we had lunch yesterday. What did you have to eat? These aren't really great controls, but it's something that an attacker wouldn't know. So you could think about doing that. Obviously, having far more robust systems or processes in place, like, hey, I will never call you and tell you to transfer money. So that will never happen. So if it happens, it's obviously not me. So that's a much more robust way of handling the situation. Is you just downscope any potential situations in which that could happen.
I guess there's been this as the technologies change, 20, 30 years ago, we had chain letters when everybody sent each other
Yeah.
letters. Then we had, spam and phishing emails when email came out, probably in the 90s.
Yeah.
And we've had that in the last 30 years. And I guess this is just an ongoing use of the technology that we have. And with any use of technology, there's good and there's bad, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, and the "I love you" letter, which kind of built upon the fact that chain letters existed because people wanted to know who loved them, and then they would get infected with a virus. Yeah, to a certain extent, that's the case. I mean, this is in kind of the next evolution of this, of the technology, and where it really becomes problematic for a couple reasons. Let's talk about the misinformation and, narrative evidence aspect, which is what most people kind of focus on.
Yeah.
If we had kind of robust institutions that people had high confidence in, we could go and find out whether something was real or fake. If we had some of this blame, so I kind of came up with something I call the generative misinformation cycle, and it kind of talks about generating misinformation, amplifying it, increasing engagement, and all in the hopes of an outcome. Well, our social media platforms have algorithms that tend to amplify the worst aspects of this type of misinformation. It's not, people don't generate deep fakes to spread messages of positivity and kindness, right? So these are usually meant to aggravate people's biases and to get people riled up. So those are things that the social media platforms tend to amplify more often. If misinformation wasn't amplified, it would be highly ineffective. But we kind of have these systems that kind of help amplify these sorts of negative messages. And not to put all of the so the algorithms are certainly the social media's fault. I think a lot of people oversimplify social media. They think of it as an application that they use. They put things in and people share things with them. But what we're talking about is a highly complex ecosystem across multiple geographic regions with multiple geographic laws and all of these different things. It's a highly complex organism. So a lot of times I hear people saying, "Well, I don't understand why Facebook just doesn't take all that down, or they just don't do, or Twitter doesn't just do X, Y, or Z," and they don't understand. They probably can't. They just the resources, the complexity of the issues is just it's not in their capabilities to be able to do that in any realistic fashion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the classic things is that you should be able to have to use an ID to use social media. But it's always been pointed out that there are certain countries like Myanmar and stuff like that where actually using social media is actually, and going against the government, some in our world is actually seen as a positive thing.
Yeah.
And many a dictator would love to get their hands on all the IDs of everybody using and saying things bad about them.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I go back and forth with that. I don't think using your real name stops misinformation. I mean, we've kind of
No.
seen that that doesn't happen. I mean, a lot of things that I see are posted by real people using the real names, verified check marks. I mean, these are real people posting this stuff. So, or at least amplifying it. And I mean, it's not an easy problem to solve. Otherwise, it would have been solved by now. I
Mm.
mean, it's not like these platforms say, "Hey, I want all of this on my network." And a scarier fact is that by some estimates, in the near future, up to 90% of the content will be generated by some sort of algorithm, be it a large language model, generative image models. So we're kind of creating this entire internet of synthetic media, be it text, be it images, be it video, and that's actually kind of a scary thing to get into. I mean, when we talk about elections, like, I think that a lot of this misinformation and deepfakes, you are going to hear a lot of stories in the next year or so around the impact of these things. I'm highly skeptical of instances of things like deepfakes and actual outcomes that are purported. I think we're in a highly polarized environment, and I don't think any amount of misinformation is going to change people's minds. And I know that because when actual proof of something comes out, it doesn't change people's minds either. So people kind of have highly entrenched ideologies, almost like religion. So the thought that some synthetic media is going to come along and change people's minds on any statistically important level is probably not going to happen. But there are lots of things that people don't care about, and those are the ones where deepfakes are super effective, right? So if you think if you've seen the Pope in a puffer jacket
Yeah.
image, that fooled a lot of people,
Yeah.
mainly because people didn't care.
Mm.
They didn't have
He looked
highly,
cool though, didn't he? I think that,
yes, yeah,
I mean, it was actually a positive thing.
yeah. He should have actually went out and bought the coat and then
Yeah.
had a photo taken, and everybody would have thought it was a deep fake. So
Yeah.
yeah. So those are the situations in which I think are where people don't have like highly entrenched opinions, where this type of misinformation, these types of deepfakes can fool people because you haven't brought your critical thinking and you haven't brought your biases, for better or worse, to bear on the topic.
So, what about the future? Clearly there's an impact in terms of AI. There's an impact in terms of politics, all kinds of things. What do you think the future is going to hold for us with deepfakes?
Yeah. So I think that there will be much more. So I originally broached this issue back in 2020, and when I relaunched my blog, I kind of started with this because I thought that there was too much hype around the deepfakes in support of like narrative evidence, and I was trying to point out the fact that the kind of the real legacy of this could be in its use to harass people.
Yep.
So I mean, putting normal, well, I say normal, like let's say putting average people who don't have a huge public presence, who don't, who aren't celebrities, putting them in situations in which they were never in and using that to harass people. Because in that case, once again, it doesn't matter whether the evidence of them doing something is real or not. It's used in that form. I also mentioned back in 2020 that the people who should be super concerned about this were actors and actresses, because the technology that powers deepfakes could very well be coming for their jobs, which is something that we've seen just this year. Was something that came up in the negotiations in the SAG-AFTRA strike. So I think there's the genie's not going back into the bottle. I would expect that you'd start to see some laws around the world about, non-consensual image creation. I would imagine that would start happening. I know it's being talked about, but
But that's also probably being driven by Hollywood, isn't it? Because there's they have a particular issue, especially of people putting in effect heads on bodies, isn't it?
correct. Yep, yep. And this has
Without
always
going
been a
into too
problem.
much
Yeah,
detail.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So this has always been a problem. I mean, people have been photoshopping people in
Mm.
situations for what's changed is that, first of all, photoshopping somebody can take a decent amount of time. So we've kind of reduced the friction in creating some of this content. So by using, the tools, different tools available, you can generate this much faster. So, and it's become more approachable to people who don't have a background in technology to be able to create these things. So that's kind of what changed. In the near term, it's going to get a lot worse. My silver lining hope, and now this is a stretch, is that people just tire of it. Like, it's kind of novel right now, so people are using the technology to do all kinds of things. But if there's one thing humans are good at, it's getting bored of things.
Yeah.
So it's possible that this constant deluge fire hose of content, even negative content, just causes people to tune out. If you kind of think of this stuff as kind of intellectual junk food, at first, you know, eating cake and ice cream for every meal every day seems like a really super fun thing to do, but after a while, it gets very tiring. So, um, there might be some hope there. I'm not willing to go to Vegas and place a bet on that, but I do have hopes that that could potentially be the case, is that we can count on people's boredom. Um, but I agree that there's a very high likelihood that a lot of the content you start to see in the next couple of years is just generated from algorithms.
And just finally, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything that we can do, or we're just going to have to?
Yeah, I would try. I mean, so first of all, societally,
Hmm.
I think that we need to replace certain school programs very early on. So I mean, if you have to take out calculus, but you know, probability and statistics and data literacy early in development would certainly help, because it would draw out some skepticism and force some more critical thinking. You know, as an adult who's being bombarded with things, kind of questioning the content you see, saying how likely is this to be a real image? Does this support a larger narrative where somebody's trying to convince me to do something? It's a lot of work, and that's why people don't read the articles they share. So they certainly aren't going to go try to track down all the information they can about it. So the kind of the problem that even social networks are having is that, you know, people expect the detection technology for these types of things to work at 100% success rate. It's just not possible. The first couple times you get something wrong, people will discount the checking altogether. So back in 2020, 2021, the fact checkers on Facebook were flagging things that were actually real as misinformation or false. And that gave a whole group of people a platform to say, hey, look, this doesn't work at all. Look, they're purposefully trying to silence me. They put me in Facebook jail or whatever they call it, and over saying something that's actually true. So I think it's a huge problem, and we often count too much on people trying to develop technology to protect us against other pieces of technology.
Yeah,
And there's definitely a mismatch in this area. So I wouldn't expect a reliable detection anytime soon on this front.
Nathan, thank you so much for coming on and talking about deepfakes. It's a fascinating subject, and I'm sure something that's going to change and evolve over time. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on, you know, Mastodon, on infosec.exchange. So on Twitter at Nathan Hamiel, and on Mastodon at nhamel. On Twitter, you can just type in my name, and perilous.tech as well. So if anybody has any additional questions, please reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation. Happy to answer any questions you have. And thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, and thank you to Evelyn. I knew that she was going to tune in, so thanks for that comment. So thank you, Nathan.